be back.
Welcome back.
All right, welcome to the Gerety Awards Grand Jury U.S. Insights Panel. This is where we meet every year to talk with U.S. jurors about the winning work and trends that captured their hearts and their votes. This is an informal conversation, so we're going to have some fun. And of course, Gerety is unique because we are discussing advertising from the female lens. I'm Stephanie Paterik, a longtime advertising journalist, advisor, and board member of audpop, a filmmaking platform that connects brands with purpose-driven creatives. And I have some amazing guests here today. I want to introduce you to Shayne Millington, CCO of McCann, New York. Hi, Shayne.
Hi.
Kaleeta. Hi, good to see you. And Kaleeta McDade, our Chief Experience Design Officer at VMLY&R. Hi, Kaleeta.
Hey.
And then we've got, last but not least, Zara Mirza, Global Head of Brand at GE.
Hi.
Hi. Ladies, it's great to see you today. I'm so happy you're taking time to be with us, and thanks for everyone tuning in. So I want to dive right in, and Kaleeta, I'm going to start with you. I'd love to know from all of you, but what surprised you most in the judging room this year?
Yeah, and we had this discussion because we had a very active discussion overall about how many of these stories are coming from lived experiences. So before, I think maybe the last couple of years, we would look at audiences, demographics, and we would kind of do some broad sweeping activations and storytelling. But now it feels more empathic, like we're having, more stories that are from actual lived experiences. And it's been great to see the work that comes out. For example, womb stories. It's not just about, hey, I have my period. What time of the month is that? It's what it feels like, right? Like, it's hard to explain to somebody what that feels like, especially when you may not have a uterus, you may not be a woman. Like, it's hard to be like, this is the pain I'm feeling. So to encapsulate that in a storytelling mechanism and a way of capturing people's pain. And then Black elevation. I lived in Seattle for a long time. It's very diverse, not that biggest Black community. And then I moved to Atlanta. And just finding Black businesses, and people don't realize, like, hair stuff, like there's just so many lived experiences that were kind of codified in storytelling this year.
I love that. And there's so much talk about authenticity. And it seems like advertisers are finding a way, like you said, with that lived experience of really getting to authenticity. Zara, I'm curious from you, what surprised you this year?
Just to build on what Kaleeta was saying, again, because for me, Pain Stories was such a great submission and worthy of a Grand Prix winner, is also authenticity, but also staying power. I would say Bodyform and AMV, BBGO have stayed with this lived experience year over year, and are just imbuing it with a deeper meaning, more authenticity. And I think what got kind of chucked out of the room was anything that seemed like you were hydroplaning across a trend. But in terms of what surprised me, I will say overall, from being on the client side, just the bar. I started off creative agency side, and real sort of accolades to my peers here in this discussion. Like, I know what it takes to get to that level of creativity. And we were just talking about still being in a hybrid world. And so, like, bringing that bar and that level of creativity when you're on kind of Zooms as well as in person is really hard. So just props to all of our agency partners in being able to do that, because I thought the bar was really high. And secondly, for me, like, a sense of humor. Like, there was loads this year that I did not find funny whatsoever, and like I had to really kind of steady myself to kind of come into work. But I love humor, and I loved seeing that brought in, especially as a Brit, a kind of like dry sense of humor. So like, total props to the creative leaders and creative teams who had the confidence to bring that through this year.
Zara, I'm curious, was there a piece of humorous work that comes to mind for you?
So one of the one of the Grand Prix winners, Superhuman, by the in-house Channel 4 team. Again, that sort of it is, we saw a lot of this the first year of COVID, the kind of like rousing but sort of plinky plonk piano music, pulling at the emotional heartstrings. And I thought Superhuman did that, again, very rousing, very impactful, but also had a very sort of a wry kind of humorous tone to it as well.
Yeah, there's a moment in that ad when I think the text pops on the screen, the punchline that's like, you have to, I can't remember it exactly, but you have to be crazy to do this. And I laughed out loud, which is kind of a rare experience in an ad. Shayne, you're nodding your head and laughing. I'm curious, what surprised you? What got your attention?
You know what it is? It's like, I went back and looked at everything last night, and I'm always surprised every year. Like there's always something surprising. That's why we love this business. That's why we get on panels. That's why we chat. But what's really interesting, if you look across everything, it's to build on the lived experience, it's education. So it's educating people who may not have had the lived experience, right? So to be able to create that, you need the diversity, you need the lived experience, you need that point of view in the room, which is why Gerety is so important to have panels like this and to have juries like this. But it's education. You look at womb stories, which is educating people, men, let's say, on what it feels like what it emotionally feels like to have a miscarriage, to not have a uterus, to go through a period. I was just watching a TikTok as I was coming in that someone on the street was asking men how many tampons do you think women use during their cycle? And they were like, 4? So, and not one man got it right. Okay. So, but it's that kind of thing. It's education. You look at Superhuman. I don't know what that feels like, but I felt something from it. From Unfiltered, which is one of my absolute favorites. It's educating people on a history that we don't know about. If you go through most of the winners, it's educating people on something that we didn't realize. Most people didn't realize, let's say, the majority. And to have that lived experience in the rooms when we're creating this work, and the clients as well, to have that diversity, you have to have the diversity to be able to offer up the lived experience. So to me, it's not that it was surprising, it's that I was excited to be seeing more and more of it, excited to see more issues that we haven't been seeing. And in a way that isn't just through research, but people that have actually been in the room to influence. So that was kind of, you could feel it. You could feel it in the room.
I love that. And thank you for bringing that full circle to what Kaleeta said too. Let's take a step back, because I know every jury is different, right? There's a dynamic within the room and everyone has their own criteria in a sense. I'm wondering what emerged for you all during deliberations as the criteria. What was the bar and what should future entrants keep in mind?
We'll go reverse. Honestly, I've been on a lot of juries, safe space. This one has the safest space. By far. I could talk about how it feels to be the only woman in the room at times, and how, womb stories made me feel a specific way, and maybe another woman doesn't feel that way, but we were all very kind. We've all had a shared experience of being in this business as a woman. And so that, to me, the debates are the debates. That's the best part. It's not like we're all sipping tea and eating crumpets. It's not like it's a girly thing. It's that we were able to speak from our heart, and we were able to speak it in a way that maybe we weren't being judged, possibly in other arenas.
Yeah, I love that, Shayne. I think we were in New York, and just the joy of being together, talk about lived experiences as leaders. We've all been living through this ourselves, and so a place where, as well as do the work, do the judging, you can release a little bit and just pick up on the challenges. The industry is so dynamic, going through so much change, and when people there were, sidebars and breaks and coffee breaks, and just helping lift each other and giving different perspectives. I found that great. One thing that was interesting, because I haven't done creative reviews in person for a while, let alone judging, was like the body language. And I forgot about that in a creative review, that can become quite dominant, right? So if someone like belly laughs, or someone's like, what? So just remembering, to keep, I think it's much easier on sort of Zoom, to keep your own perspective, because you don't pick up on a lot of that body language. And then for me, just the expertise and discipline from the other judges in the room, especially when it came to craft, like editing, like music. It was awesome to learn and hear a real sort of expert opinion. In client side, you're sort of more general across the full spectrum.
That's such a good point, Zara.
Yeah, and building off that, I think the expertise, I think people think, oh, a room full of women, oh, that sounds like a single note. And it's like, no, right? And so for me, I love the safe space, just building off what Shayne said. I love the expertise building off Zara, because at the end of the day, we are evaluating work in the same way that our counterparts would, but just being able to do it at a global scale, in person, with people who, have had similar lived experience, like all of those things put together, I think allowed us to evaluate the work in a different way. And I mean that by saying, we could all be authentic. We could all show up authentically. We could all show up in almost a sisterhood and have these discussions and know that you could say something and you wouldn't be judged. You knew that someone would say something and they were coming from a place of specialty and expertise. So it was a really good experience.
Yeah, I would even say, oh, so sorry, Stephanie.
No, go on, Shayne.
I just wanted to say, I think too, is that, it's so funny what Kaleeta was saying. It's like, yeah, if you hear like, a female only jury, it's like, oh, okay, what is that? What does that mean? Like, are you not going to get the talent that a regular jury would get? Actually, you're getting better expertise, because all of the women are leaders in their field, and they actually have, no one handed us these positions.
Right.
Through grit and perseverance and passion, we were able to get where we all got. So you have a really invigorated group of women who have lived experience, but also are top in their craft, which is quite interesting. Just wanted to add that. Sorry.
Yeah, I love that. And for me, back to that sort of expertise and a group that wants to lift everyone up. So for me, we had a big discussion on music tracks, and as a client, you're seeing stuff when you got to choose one of three options, right? And you give terrible feedback of, oh, it just doesn't sound right. But like actually hearing the craft of like, what does it take to lay a track like that? And what is that music? What is that sound design doing? And hearing that in a place where it's sharing, versus like, I'm the expert and I have to pretend to be an expert because I've, made loads of ads. It was really, that's what I loved. I loved best about it. And to Kaleeta's point as well, I think the bar is extremely high in the Gerety Awards in terms of authenticity. Like, we know what it's like to be talked at. We know what it's like to be overlooked. We know when something's performative, and we can smell that a mile off. And so
I love that. You're so right. It's yes, like yes.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a realness, and to your point, Shayne, when you walk into the room of leaders, business leaders at this level, we know it. We sit, you're immediately a collective power. And that's awesome for the Gerety Awards to sort of recognize and bring that group together.
Love that.
Zara, I'm so glad you brought that point. You said something earlier today about work that hydroplanes versus work with depth. And I'm going to remember that, because I do think Gerety, it's not just a place to send your women's work. It's the place to send your work of depth, because as you said, it's a discriminating audience. I'd love to get into some of the actual ads and hear you describe your favorites. Kaleeta, I wonder if you can kick me off. What was your favorite ad? What do you like, if the people who haven't seen all the ads, what do you want them to go Google and look up today?
Yeah, so I love I Will Always Be Me. And I think because medically there's things in my family that, are resonant with that story. And it is pretty much, it's a disease that MDN, I think is what it's called, where people are unable to speak and there's a degradation in their ability to speak over time. And so there used to be like a 3-month process where you had to capture your voice and do all this craziness. They wrote a single book that people had to read, and it captured all the tones, intonation, everything that was necessary to replicate their voices. But then this narrative of the story itself was reminding their family members they will always be them, right? And so for me, it's just like, man, when you can get those two things right, when you can get the technology with the, business, side of it being accretive for the business, and then the emotional part of the humanity, I just think that's gorgeous. So I loved it. And I know there was a lot of purpose work this year, but I think there's a good balance of things that give you connection, variety, like all the human needs that we have. And for me, that one kind of hit all of the ones.
Totally agree. I love that one.
Yeah. And that was from Dell Technologies and Intel, I think done by, let's see.
VMLY&R.
Of course. How could I forget?
But it was before I joined. I loved it. So just for the record.
Kaleeta, I'm so glad you brought that up, because, and it was such a great example of not just using tech for tech's sake, but really for a utility. Incredible. Shayne, I'm curious, what's your favorite? What do you want to share?
Mine, if you're watching this, I'm sure you know it. I'm sure you've seen the case study. I absolutely loved Vice. I absolutely loved Vice. And the reason why I loved it is because I looked at it as a tipping point. So it's a tipping point in education, where no longer does government, big money need to teach us the true history. Yeah. And that is in a very simple, affordable way. You're able to reach people and tell people the true truth behind things. Before we would have books and they would have to get published and you'd have to teach them in classes and things like that. But if you're able to utilize technology in an interesting way to teach people a history that has been hidden for so long in such a simple way, I thought that was groundbreaking. I was like, it's a tipping point. I hope, this is like my hope, is that it expands. Because it's so important. It's so important, especially in public education. We are at that moment in history where it could go a few different ways, and just having that information out there, not hidden in a library or, in some fancy college somewhere, but to be able to make it for the masses, I thought that was remarkable.
The truth has been inconvenient for such a long time, and our revisionist history has just been like, this is what lore is. And there's a great quote that says, until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And I think we have this opportunity to just be truthful, right? And I think it sounds so simple, but it's huge. And I love the idea of doing it more. Yeah,
it's true. It's like, I have 2 boys, right? I have 2 little boys that are in elementary school, and they're learning history, but they're in a public school, and they're spending a lot of time on one particular aspect of history. They're not learning the things that Vice is talking about. They're not learning about African history at all. So I, as a parent, need tools like this to help make it as fun and inventive and interesting. And I have to learn it myself. I mean, I educate myself. Things like this just help.
Yeah.
I love that. I also love the semiotics of that happening on your mobile device versus like billboards around the British Museum, or, you know, it's like that. For us, it is, you know, that's your information. You're in control of that. You can take it on. It's very much more personal. Shayne, to your point, it's not in, you know, textbooks, and it's not academic. It's, you know, in the lives of consumers.
Yeah, truly democratized
Yeah.
education. Okay, Zara, who's your favorite child?
So for me, it's where we started actually, is with pain stories, like just phenomenal, and not in a glib way of, you know, kind of women choosing body form, or, you know, for me, it was, you know, I think the work that Body Form and AMV BBDO has done has been phenomenal, groundbreaking category, redefining the category. And it's easy just to stop there, right, with a great ad, and, you know, stop using like the blue liquid to represent your period, and like that's good enough. But to take it on, to really understand and champion on behalf of women, and something, you said this, Stephanie, much more sort of utility based. For me, went beyond that, you know, kind of, I think they won the Grand Prix for illustration. It was far beyond that. It was about, you know, starting a new dialogue and giving women the language, or validating the language that women use to describe their pain. And like, when you go further deeper into this, as we all have, if you've had children in America, if you're a woman of color having children in America, like a lot of my friends, you go into that sort of like medical experience like fearful. It's not great, and this is, you know, in a different forum, but like I say, giving women the confidence and validating how we talk about pain, how we experience pain, and creating platforms to amplify that, exactly changing the discord. I don't know what you other ladies thought of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I think, you know, what's so funny is that you would expect to, because there were so many different mediums that were used, illustration, film, you would almost expect us to just be talking about the craft. But the craft is actually helping tell the story, right? So we're actually talking about the emotion behind the stories, which is very hard to do. I mean, we're bombarded all the time with different messages, but the craft helped elevate the message. It didn't get in the way of the message. And I think oftentimes you'll see the craft kind of like, oh, that's so beautiful and cool, and I've never seen that technique before. And they had that craft in there, but it didn't get in the way. It actually helped resonate the emotion that a woman feels during those moments. And even as a woman, I was educated throughout that story, because there are things, even though I'm a woman, I don't experience everything. So there were moments in there that, one, I forgot, because I'm in my mid 40s, as a young Shayne, and ones that I didn't realize were coming to me later on, and just experiences that I would never have experienced myself. So it brought me in as a woman and reminded me I'm not alone, but it also allowed me to see the breadth of experiences that I had no idea about.
Awesome.
I love that it was sort of the genesis of the idea was this ubiquitous pain scale, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10. And as someone who was in labor for 42 hours, if I break my toe and someone says, how painful is that? I'm like, that's a 2, that's nothing, you know. So this idea that actually putting language and putting art and visuals to our pain to help us describe it in a way that I think is can be more equal. So I love that one. So we're close to out of time, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you all about trends you saw coming out of the work this year. Last year, we saw a lot of breakthrough work, by the way, coming out of gaming and CPG. Wondering what you noticed, either trends in tone, creative choices, or even types of brands.
I would say the trend I'm noticing is optimism. I think during COVID, we were in a very serious kind of place.
Mhm.
And even though I think there were serious topics and different things, it's kind of this undertone of optimism, this kind of resurgence of emerging from something. We all were collectively part of an I can't talk today, an anthropological test that none of us signed up for. Right? None of us wanted to do it. We didn't know, we were voluntold. And I think coming out of that, we're emerging or re-emerging. And there's this rise of optimism and hopefulness, and just, I'm feeling it, and I love it.
Yeah, I love that. I saw humor as well. And again, I talked about that, but back to my hydroplaning comment, optimism, but as you said, Kaleeta, we've lived through this, like we are in it, and we're still in it. And so sort of a commitment to whatever cause or whatever, sort of brands are going after. It has to be sort of long-term commitment versus just like jumping on a metaverse trend, for example.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, the trend, I totally agree. I think the trend for me is that, yes, we see purpose-driven work, but yes, the purpose doesn't always have to be the same. But I think brands are being rewarded with bravery. We're seeing that government is slow, they don't have the resources, and brands and companies do. Yeah. And they are being tasked by their audiences to get involved. And so you're seeing bigger and bigger work like Breakaway, Plastic Off, by Whirlpool, trying to figure out how to get plastic out of the ocean, so you're seeing innovation and you're seeing groundbreaking work that I would say 10 years ago, if anybody were to say, like, you're going to see these things come out of advertising work or brands, no one would touch it. But now brands have to get involved in the conversation because governments, I think especially Gen Z, millennials, are realizing that government may not be the way to go. So they're looking to the ones with where the money is.
And it's creativity at a C-suite level, right? It's not just the CMO anymore. It's the CEO having to think about operations. How do I change all these things to, help this purpose? And I feel like altruism is one part, but there's also business creative things that are happening. Like, these things that are changing aren't just things where we're like, it feels good to do it. No, it's also good for business.
Yeah, right. I love that you mentioned Whirlpool as well, because a well-deserved Grand Prix winner, someone who works in an engineering-led company at GE. That is a tough thing to get through. That is not something you can kind of sell in on a sizzle reel. That requires real commitment from Whirlpool as well. And I think to what you're both saying, every touch point counts, and companies are having to look at their whole sort of supply chain. And what a great way. It was so visceral, right? That you get to like pull it off and like wash it.
I mean, wash. It was great. It was like, oh, what a novel idea. Yeah. Like, it was just like, it created that unboxing experience that felt like you were part of helping in some way. And brands are rewarded by taking these risks. That's the thing that you realize. And it is, you're right, Zara. It's like, and being on we'll call it the other side, though I don't think there's not two sides to it, but it is, you'll see much more of this, the agency and the brand coming together. Our best work at McCann is the same thing. When the agency and the brand, the lines are blurred, and the bravery and the vision is the same. That's what I bet you every story matches all of those for those.
I love that. And you've got all these touch points now in order to, I think, brands win. I think consumers win as well. In terms of you look at all the headlines in the climate crisis that we're in. It's like, it can be paralyzing, but it's like you pull consumers in with Whirlpool, and I'm excited for what agencies are going to do with, once you do open up all of the touch points available, and you add that layer of creativity and creative ambition. I think that's what we've seen in all of these Grand Prix winners. I definitely think magic will happen.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. I can't believe this half hour flew by, but
It
I love ending on this note of the work that's exciting us and that feels very future focused. And Shayne, this idea that you're getting at of, the magic happening when all the sides come together. And this panel perfectly represents that blend, by the way, too. So thank you, Kaleeta, Zara, and Shayne, not only for your judging, but for making time to pull back the curtain for us today and let us see what you were thinking as you chose the winning work. I'm so appreciative, and I can't wait to see what you three do, what we're going to be talking about next year. And also, I want to thank everyone who tuned in with us today. You can find all of the winning work that we were discussing at geretyawards.com/winners. And Gerety, thank you so much for giving us this forum to have this